In this video, I want to talk about the different roles you can have in an animation production, which ones might suit you and what you need to do to get into those roles. So this is going to be a very general overview of some of the key roles in a story. I feel like there are a lot of animators that don't really know the other jobs in the animation industry, especially if you're an animation student. You might not be aware of all the different work that's out there that you could potentially step into. It can also really help your knowledge of how animations are actually made and what potentially your career path could be in the animation industry. Because a lot of people, they only know that, oh yeah, you can be an animator, but they don't know much past that, or they know that you can be a director. So these are probably, if you are going to continue to be an animator, these are the people that you're going to be working alongside if you go into an animation production. Now, I will say that the titles I've given the people in this, they are very different depending on what category of film you're making. For example, an executive producer in a film could be very different depending on if you're working on a short film, or if you're working in a commercial company that does advertisements, or if you're working in a feature film. They are kind of different depending on who you work with. So that's just to keep in mind, and the same goes for director and things. They do operate slightly differently depending on where you are and what the size of the production is. But I'm going to try my best to just give you a general idea and also tell you what you can do or what kind of traits you need to have to be in one of these roles. The other thing to keep in mind is that if you are in a very large production with a lot of people involved, your role in this is going to be very narrow and defined and specific. If you are in a small production with a small team, you're going to have to be a generalist. You're going to have to be doing lots of skills and have a wide a wide role in the film. I'll start off with kind of the top of the top, the executive producer. So this is like Mr. Moneybags, the guy who's paying the bills, paying the checks. So generally this is the person who commissions it in the first place. Now, if we're talking feature-length film, this could be the film production company who invests. So it can be the investor, or it can be the person who goes out and pitches to the investors and then earns the investment. Or it can just be, if we're talking about a small commission, like for example, I work on a lot of music videos. In these music videos, the executive producer I credit is the artist who comes to me and who pays for this project to take place. So this is it's a commercial industry, and so apart from on specific non-profit films, usually there's an executive producer, and without that executive producer, a lot of things just don't get made. The producer, so the role of producer is the unsung hero of production. Things just don't happen without a producer. All of the management and organization all stems from this top person. Such an important role in a film. I would say that the role of producer is equal to the position of the director, maybe even more so. On small productions, often the director is also the producer. So you'll have you'll be the director, but you also have to do the roles that a producer would. That's what I am doing right now. For some of my films, I consider myself more a producer than a director, and then on other films I consider myself more a director than a producer. It's a bit complicated, I guess. But basically the producer does all of the crucial management jobs that the director doesn't want to do or can't do. So this is staying on track of time, estimating the budget, paying the workers, talking to the executive producers, sorting out the budget, finding out how much money they've got to last them, what those expenses are going to be along the way, what deadlines they've got to hit at what times, and making sure that the scenes are there, delivered, ready to meet those deadlines. All that kind of stuff. The producer will be there from the day the film starts to the very last day that the film ends, the production. So they're there through the whole thing. They're like the parent of the film. They don't go away. If anything happens with the producer, it's catastrophe for the film. This is the kind of person that would be a good producer. A producer is, at heart, it has to be a born hustler. Because producers need to hustle all the time, they need to be talking to people, negotiating, they get into arguments, and then they need to resolve arguments, resolving conflicts with people. They've just got to like really work hard at this. You need to be organized and on top of things as well to be a producer. Needless to say, you need an in-depth knowledge of the entire animation process. You know, you need to know pretty much everything. Of course, not in the expert details that the technicians will have, but you need to know exactly how all the pieces of the puzzle fit together, and you need to go and do that. You need to know that inside out. There will be a lot of obstacles in the way of the producer, and the producer has to systematically take down each of those obstacles. So let's say something's too expensive to shoot, or you know, an important worker in the force decides to quit and they need replacing, or the distributors for your film won't accept your film because of some kind of technical reason or some kind of reason with the film. Very important job, and to me they don't get credited enough. People, you know, people don't know their names and things like they do the directors. But that's just how it is. It's less glamorous, the work that they're involved in, but it's very important. I don't actually know all the answers to how you become a producer, but the advice I would give is do a ton of networking with people in the film industry. Film festivals are great for that, and also if you go to an animation school or something, that's great because you have those contacts. Make friends with everyone, be nice, be someone that people want to hang out with and want to talk to, know your stuff. The other thing is that you need to be involved in your own productions. The whole point of a producer is that the producer can make it happen. So if you're a producer and you've never made a film in your life and you're trying to get hired as a producer, you never will. You've got to make your own. What you've got to do is you've got to scrape together a budget however you can, and then you know, you need to get the right people in place and be this kind of bridge maker between creative talents. So be involved in your own productions, kind of be an entrepreneur about it. Make things work. And also a thing that very well-known producers do, you got to team up with the right director. A producer works the best when they have a very good partnership with a good director, and you know, you don't really as a producer have to change who you work with in terms of the director very often. In fact, some of the most successful producers they've kind of just stuck with the same director, and they are like a duo team that together make the films. And then, you know, of course they enlist lots of people's help in that, but it's really them at the core of it. They're like the nucleus of a cell. So now I'm going to move on to director. So this is the one that most people know or are at least aware about. So to be a director, you need to have obviously an intimate knowledge, but this time not so much on production, although that does help, but your intimate knowledge needs to be first and foremost on story, plot, and character. Those are really important. You've got to know those really well. You can't just know the film that you're making, you need to fully understand the film, and there's a big difference there between knowing the film and understanding it. It's tricky to give advice on being a director because there's lots of ways to go about doing it, but some of the best advice I could give is to be assertive and confident in your ideas. Have a little bit of faith. I struggle with this because I'm very indecisive. If I'm making a decision, it will take me a long time to come to an answer, and even then I might be like, not sure. You know, there's a lot of tricky ones. You've got to just pick one. If it's A or B, you've just got to go A or B, but not A or B, I don't know, because what that does is, like, everyone who's looking up to you for a direction for where the film should go, they're going to lose confidence in you, and the morale is just going to plummet. And that's, you know, a really big problem if you're a director. You've just got to know what you want. Vision is a really important one. For a director, it's really important to be able to see in your mind's eye. So when you close your eyes, you can see the scene unfold. Very difficult. I struggle with that. Some people are very talented at that and they have very visual minds. I do struggle a little bit with it, but of course I do get visions. As a director, you're going to be bombarded with like advice. You're going to have to go out and seek advice as well for things, and you're going to have lots of people talking to you, lots of people giving suggestions on what you should do for a scene. You've got to be selective with who you choose to listen to. I'm not saying shut yourself off to everyone, but you do need to develop a filter where you only let in the advice which is helping you to tell your story. That's very important. You know, someone might give you advice and it could be good advice, but they're trying to tell a different story which isn't your story. They might not be aligned to what you're trying to tell with this story. The other thing is, as a director, you need to be courageous and brave. It's a very tough role, and it's very scary having all of these people looking to you for an answer on something, and you need to keep your cool. It's really, really tricky to do that sometimes, because you're responsible for a lot of things. So the other thing is, of course, before you even do any of that, you need to learn your fundamentals of visual storytelling. You should also try and get a general knowledge of all the aspects of filmmaking, because then you can effectively communicate with all of your team members. So, you know, you can talk to the background artist, and the background artist will say, well, you know, I was thinking of using the rule of thirds here. And if you say, what's the rule of thirds? Then they'll be like, what? You know, so that's not a great example, but you need to be able to talk the talk, understand what people are saying, because you're a communicator at the end of the day. Like, what you're doing is you are communicating the vision that you have to other people. If you do that with words, great. If you do that with drawings, that's fine as well. It is difficult. You need to be very, very eloquent. Some of the best directors can just really talk someone through it, and in the case of live action films, you know, with actors, they can make the actors feel how they need to feel in that role, and they can try, kind of like create an environment like that. Maybe not as much in animation, maybe a little bit. I've had some experience in having to do that as a director. I'll quickly talk about assistant directors. I don't know if this is always a common thing in animation production. It might be if you've got like a feature-length animation. Definitely in live action film as well, the assistant director. I don't want to downplay the role of an assistant director, because they're always busy with stuff, but they basically run about after the director. Let's say the director says, okay, the art department needs to be doing something, you know, a message needs to go to the design department. The assistant director will make sure that everyone on the team knows what they're doing. If the director's trying to think of how something's working, instead of bothering the director directly, the worker might talk to the assistant director instead. It's a lot of yelling to other workers, corresponding administrative tasks. I imagine it as like in the mafia, like how a mafia boss might have their right-hand man who talks to other people, and then the mafia boss listens to the assistant, but they won't talk to people directly. It's a little bit like that. It's like a scene from Goodfellas. The assistant director is also the first main person the director can ask for a second opinion. So often they really understand the kind of vision that the director is trying to get to, and they are there with the director if the director is kind of mulling something over in their mind. I'm not going to talk too much about the writer, because it's a bit obvious, but the writer is the one with the story. On small productions, this will also be the director, or in the commercial world, the writer might be the executive producer. So the executive producer for a music video might come to you with a script that they have written, and they just want it carried out. That's very possible. In fact, on the production that I'm working on currently, that is how it's going down. I'm directing it, but I didn't write it. They're the ones that write the dialogue. If you've got dialogue in your animation, it's all because of the writer. Now, okay, so the designer. So the designer, there are often multiple designers on large productions, but essentially the designer will set the visual rules for the story. All of the other artists will follow those rules closely after the designer has established the main design of the film. They also get everything to kind of work visually alongside each other, so the characters will look correct according to how the backgrounds look and other things, and create a real visual identity for the film and for the story. To be a designer, you need to be an accomplished artist first of all, so it would help to be formally trained, and it's in the name as well. A designer designs things, so they need really good knowledge of shape and line and form, but yeah, especially shape language. What does a shape communicate to people? Their day-to-day work often involves creating numerous iterations and showing them to the director and getting feedback from the director. If you want to create a portfolio to be a designer on an animation production, I would recommend having, first of all, lots of really high quality drawings, and show that you can take an idea and create lots of little branches out from that idea into different iterations of the idea. You're kind of creating, as a designer, you're creating a catalogue of different looks for a director to then pick and choose which one the director likes. It's that ability to create a catalogue of different options. And so the work as a designer can be very rewarding, because you're having to use your imagination a lot to just come up with these continual ideas. In fact, I've heard that being a designer on animation can be a little bit too creative, and it's exhausting, and there's so much pressure to use that, to tap into that creative idea process. Although there are a lot of very special ways that designers create these shooting off ideas. Next, we've got the storyboarder. So in a way, the storyboarder is the director, depending, on the size of the production. The storyboarder can also be like the director's right-hand man. One bit of advice to storyboarders: don't animate. You're not there to animate, you're there to work on, the timing can be important if you're taking it to animatic stage, but also the composition's really important to get across the feeling. And yeah, of course, all of your fundamentals in terms of composition and a very good awareness of how things look in 3D space. Also, all of the kind of filming principles. To get into a storyboarding position on an animation production, of course, take storyboarding classes. That's the most obvious one. Deconstruct really well-made films. All the classics. Go on to IMDb Top 100 films. Systematically watch all of them from top to bottom of those top 100 films. Those should all be ones that you try and watch. Deconstruct them. Have a look at what they use with the compositions and how they tell the story visually. So also get really fluent at drawing. Draw fast and rough. Fast, rough sketches that just get the point across. They don't have to be really neat. Shouldn't be really working in too much detail. Yeah, storyboarders are extremely in demand. They cross over into live action films a lot too. So as a storyboarder, you can get a job in live action filmmaking or in animation, and even in games and things like that. So plenty of work, and because it's such a specialized role and it takes a lot of skill to be able to storyboard well, yeah, you'll always find work. It's a job that requires a lot of skill and hard work, of course. You will have to make a lot of drawings, and those drawings have to be really good. Obviously, the one that most of you are here for is to be an animator. So the next role down is animator. So the animators kind of add life to things. They create life on the screen. My advice for an animator is to learn how to draw the human figure very well, of course. If nothing else, if you can draw the human figure really well from all different angles in all different positions, just have a really good knowledge of the human body. I kind of want to say that it should be easy for you to draw the human body. You should be able to do it without too much difficulty. Understand acting. So I would recommend taking acting classes, and also just watch people. Watch how people behave and be very observant, and get into the role. Shoot reference, of course, but get into the role when you're animating. I think as an animator, especially a character animator, you need to be fascinated with people. And I think that's something that the new generation of animators often miss. They don't understand that. Is you have to have a fascination with people and how they work, and have a bit of a knowledge of how people react. So An example of this was in a recent production that I did. I was trying to explain to an animator, a learning animator, that when someone is given shocking news that is really terrible, you know, terrible news, they don't immediately turn to sadness. They don't just burst out into tears the instant they're given that news. They go through stages of grief. And, you know, of course, one of the first stages is denial, or just that moment when there's a little pause between someone being told some news and then reacting to it, because their brain has to internalize it and chew on it a little bit. So I had to explain all this stuff to them. That's the kind of stuff you need to know, be aware of as an animator. So if you're interested in acting for animators, Ed Hooks is a really good source of information for that, and I think he's got a few courses that are that would be very useful for that. And of course, on top of that, you need to really know your stuff with the behaviors of physics, and especially gravity and all of those kind of things. If you're a VFX animator, if you're an effects animator, you need to, you know, you need to have a very good understanding of physics across multiple different sort of materials and things. So for the background artists, they're stage builders. They tell the story of that the characters can't. This adds detail and finish, and basically how they do it is they take the layout sketches, which are basically just sketches of the backgrounds that the storyboarder might make, or the director maybe, and then they just paint over them. So they add color, detail and values. Of course, as a background artist, because they're adding color, detail and values, that's the main thing they're doing, you need to be formally trained. I recommend knowing how to paint with, you know, oil on canvas or watercolor, you know, in one of the analog mediums first, because then that's how you can really understand color theory. Having, you know, 3 pots of paint, 3 different colors to work from, and then being able to take from those colors and create an array of different colors on the page, that is an incredible skill. Really, really difficult. I make it sound easy. It's so difficult. And that will help you really understand color theory. So values and color, and of course texture and things like that, really important with the background artist. You're also going to have to work closely with the designers, and you might even be the designer. So on a smaller production, of course, the designer would also be the background artist. My advice to a background artist is to go with your intuition. Keep the design simple, because in animation, the characters should be taking most of the focus, so you don't want something that draws too much of the focus away from the characters, who are actually, you know, the story is about the characters, unless it's like an establishing shot or something. And so keep it simple and cohesive. And yeah, it's not too hard to do those things as well if you just give it some thought. The compositor, this is a very odd role in a film. The compositor makes everything fit together nicely. So imagine that the character animation is a layer, the backgrounds are a layer, the lighting and shadow is a layer, the VFX is a layer. The compositor needs to take all of them and bring them together to work nicely with each other. This combines all of those different disciplines, but you don't really have to make any of them, you just bring them all in. And of course, on smaller productions, this gets taken on by, it can get taken on by the director, or by the animator, or the producer. Someone's got to do it in a small team. This one definitely requires a lot of technical knowledge. You also need a sharp sense of what looks good and natural in a scene. Another role is the in-betweener, or the cleanup artist. This is typically where the young talent is in a production. So this is generally like the entry point for an inexperienced animator to enter into the animation scene, and that's because it requires less expertise overall. You don't have as much responsibility, and yeah, you can kind of be like there with an animator, and you'll be taken under the animator's wing those are the roles that I wanted to list. The other roles, you know, there are others that I didn't talk about, like voice actors, managers if you're on a big production like a movie, sound technicians, Foley, composers for music. I'm not going to go into them, but those are also other roles. Some advice for you: next time you're watching an animation, keep watching through to the credits and pay attention to the roles which are credited, and those roles which are listed in the credits will give you insight into how the film was made. Also, if you're interested in learning more about the roles in animation industry, I recommend the book called Your Career in Animation, and it's by David B. Levy. Although a lot of it is different in indie production, and he only really talks about animation for television production before the age of the internet, so quite a lot of things are different now, and there's new technology. Alright, that's it. Thanks guys. Before I wrap up the video, I just want to remind you guys that the Multi-Combat Animation Tutorial course is now available for pre-order on animatorguild.com. Please check that out, especially now while the price is low, because it will be higher in the future. If you're curious about that, if you love fight scenes and you want to learn my techniques on how to make them, go over there and have a look. If you want to learn more about how to make animations, I suggest you head over to my website, animatorguild.com. Also, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is all about how to create animations. I come from kind of like the animator perspective, but nowadays I do more of directing and producing animation as well. I'm heavily involved in making lots of animations, and I try and document as much of my process as I can here on this YouTube channel. Thank you very much for watching. I hope it was helpful. I hope it helps you. If it did, leave a comment and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye. I want to give so much thanks to Andre Shreves. He has helped me out with the editing of this video, and he's got a channel that I'd really like for you to check out and subscribe. He's an animator, he makes some great content, and I'm really looking forward to his next episode, so I think you should check him out.